So our next 5 games are Brentford at home after the international break, then we have Fenerbahce away midweek, West Ham away that weekend, Leicester at home in the League Cup, and Chelsea at home the week after on the 3rd of November. Now straight off the bat, I don't care about the League Cup. Ten Hag should play the likes of Collier, Euro, Anthony, Dangor, Harry Amas, Ethan Williams and Ethan Wheatley in this type of game. I think Euro, if he's fit, he has to start, same as Amas and Wheatley, as well as one of Collier or Gore, and probably Anthony or Ethan Williams. Anthony isn't going to feature much in the Premier League or the Europa League hopefully, so you might as well give him some minutes from the start in this game, but I would like to see Ethan Williams get some minutes off of the bench. I think the game against Leicester is probably a bit early for Sekou Kone or Chido Obi Martin. I want to see them have at least 5 or 6 games with the under-21s before putting them into the first team, but Ten Hag cannot field as strong an 11 as he did against Barnsley. We've got so many games, we've had so many injuries that even this year but also last season, he has to actually use the whole squad instead of just 15 players, because we also need to see how quickly some of our youth prospects can adapt to senior football, which ones can do it the quickest, who may need a loan or more time in the under-21s, and you can only do that by playing them. We aren't West Ham or Everton. We aren't doing this thing where we prioritise the League Cup so that Ten Hag and the Cult can use it as an insurance policy in case we finish 8th and they can go on about how many trophies we've won in order to keep him. Premier League first, Europa League second, FA Cup third when it comes around in the second half of the season. League Cup I do not care about at this point. There's no point winning the League Cup if we're going to be sitting mid-table. We are Manchester United. Real Madrid certainly wouldn't put up with mid-table performances and results just because they won the Copa del Rey, which is the Spanish equivalent of the FA Cup. The League Cup is more like those mini Super Cup tournaments that some of the European countries play. But before I go any further, if you want to check out any of the new season jerseys, go over to Jersey FIFA. They've also got club and international retro jerseys as well. You can use code Atlantis for a discount. A link will be in my Instagram bio, which will be linked in the description. In the Europa League, really and truly we need a win, as we've drawn our opening 2 games, with the FC Twente game being a game that we definitely had to win. Fenerbahce away is about as hard an away fixture as you can get in the Europa League, and so I think a draw is most likely, but we cannot lose, definitely not. But in terms of the Premier League, I think Brentford and West Ham are both games we have to win. At some point in Ten Hag's tenure, we need to start looking like a Champions League level side. However, we are so bad at the moment that simply suggesting that we win 2 consecutive Premier League games against Brentford at home and West Ham away actually seemed quite ambitious. But the game after that, we've got Chelsea at home. From those 3 games, I think we need 7 points, definitely no less than 6, because we are already closer to the relegation zone than the Champions League places. We cannot afford to drop more than 3 points over the next 3 games, otherwise we could end up 8 or 9 points away from the top 4 by the start of November. And that could mean that by Christmas we could be 15 or 20 points away, essentially killing our league season for the 2nd year in 3 seasons and the 3rd time we've done this in 4 seasons. And that's 2 back-to-back seasons we've missed out on Champions League revenue, which is a huge issue because we're already pushing close to our FFP and PSR limits. So I'm saying minimum Ten Hag has to win 2 of those 3 Premier League games, and at the very least a draw against Fenerbahce, but we realistically probably need to win that. And to be honest, I just don't care about the League Cup. I just want proper rotation and some of the younger players to be given a chance. Really and truly, if you look at how Manchester United have started the season, we should be expecting 7 points from a possible 9 in those 3 Premier League games and a win against Fenerbahce. But under Ten Hag, you do have to factor in the lower standards, and so that's why I'm saying 6 points from those 3 league games and a draw against Fenerbahce, which is what really should be bare minimum. But what does Ten Hag have to change to achieve this? But in terms of personnel changes, these are the 3 main ones that I think Ten Hag has to make. So first of all, he has to bring Agate into the midfield over Casemiro or Eriksen, even when Mainu does return from injury. I also think Ten Hag has to use Mount more often in one of these 3 roles that I'm going to list in just a second. And number 3, he also has to give more minutes to the youth players like Wheatley, Collier or Gore, Ethan Williams and Harry Amas. I'll start with Agate, and it seems like a weird one because he seems like the exact type of tenacious ball winner that Ten Hag would need in such an aggressive pressing 4-2-4 system. But for whatever reason, I think it's just to make a point, he prefers Casemiro, who as we saw against Porto just doesn't have the legs to deal with the amount of space that he has to cover in the centre of the pitch. This, alongside bringing back Martinez and De Ligt, are no-brainers. I mean, we've just bought De Ligt and Agate for a combined £90 million or so. They are 100% better than Casemiro and either Evans or Maguire, In the case of De Ligt, I really don't have anything else to say on that. It just seems ludicrous that anyone would argue against it. But moving on from this, Ten Hag also has to find Mount an effective role this season. Doesn't necessarily have to be as a starter, but he does need to at least fill the void that has been left with McTominay's departure off of the bench. And Mount has such a wide-ranging skill set with very few weaknesses that, like James Milner for Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool, he could be used as Ten Hag's tactical Swiss Army knife to keep the balance in different systems. One option would be to use Mount in a wide position in Ten Hag's 4-2-4 or 4-4-2 defensive shape. United's issue is not laziness, it's categorically not. Some players just can't do workman-like roles on the flanks and cover a huge amount of space like Ji-sung Park. Playing Ahmad and Rashford in those wide roles, alongside a midfield double pivot of Casemiro and Eriksen, is the issue, not the individual players. Anyone who plays in those wide positions is going to end up getting called lazy, because when the fan base can't work out the tactical error, we just go to cliches and regurgitate talking points. Ten Hag has to put Ugarte alongside Dangor with Mount to their right and one of Garnacho or Rashford to the left, as now you have a midfield double pivot who can actually run, as well as a player in Mason Mount who's a lot more positionally aware from a defensive point of view than Ahmad, and is also a lot more tenacious and aggressive in the tackle, whilst also being a lot more accustomed to receiving the ball in central positions when United do regain the ball. Having a player like Mount on the right is also going to take the defensive burden off of Rashford or Garnacho on the other side. And from a tactical point of view, Ten Hag should be instructing Mount to come across narrow to the central midfielder on his inside when the opposition have possession on the other side, and this will allow United to then shift to a narrow 4-3-3 when needed, which will in turn compact the centre of the pitch more than Ten Hag's current 4-2-4 shape. Firstly, just because of the positioning of Mount, giving United an extra player in the centre, but also because Mason Mount is a better technical and positional defender than either Ahmad or Rashford. That would be when United don't have possession in the middle third, but both Mount and Ugarte could also be used as counter-pressing weapons, as by replacing Eriksen with Ugarte and Ahmad with Mount, you have now gone from two fairly poor and ineffective pressers and tacklers to now having Ugarte and Mount who have the energy, athleticism, tenacity and tackling technique to effectively be able to swarm around the ball when United lose possession in the opposition half, and Ugarte in particular can also be pushed further forward into the press if needed, pushing up onto the opposition's deeper line midfielders in order to make his trademark press, where he jumps out of the midfield line assertively and is able to apply pressure to the opposition player as soon as they receive possession, and more often than not Ugarte is either going to be able to put in a tackle to win the ball back or make an interception high up the pitch. And after winning the ball back inside the opposition's half, because of United's theoretical narrow defensive shape in the press, we should have players like Rashford, Fernandes and Xerxes in prime positions to receive the ball and directly attack the goal, looking to get into a shooting or a chance creating position. It does seem strange to me that Ten Hag isn't utilising either Ugarte or Mount in his starting midfield line, as you would assume that with Ten Hag wanting a high counter press alongside a quick transitional attack, both of these two would be perfect, certainly better options in terms of their skill sets for that role than either Ahmad or Eriksen. But Mason Mount could also be used in two more creative tactical roles that I think could solve issues for United. Now Ten Hag obviously isn't going to be using these systems, but he should be considering it. I would say either a 4-4-2 diamond with Mount and Gore either side of Ugarte being used as shuttling midfielders out of possession, but in possession dropping into those deep and wide areas, not just to allow the fullbacks to advance beyond them, but also to get on the ball in space away from the congested centre, wherefrom they can turn with the ball, look forward and look to progress the ball in behind the opposition's midfield, either with their long or incisive passing. Alternatively, with Mainu out, I would actually like to see Ten Hag use Mason Mount in a midfield double pivot alongside Ugarte, as once again he'd be an athletic and defensive improvement on Eriksen, whilst also having greater press resistance and creative passing ability than Casemiro in possession. I don't think Bruno Fernandes suits playing a deeper central midfield role in a double pivot, as I just don't think he has the athleticism, defensive capabilities, the press resistance when receiving the ball with his back to goal, or the ability to dictate the tempo of play from deep. He's far more of a forward than a midfielder. However, even if they aren't fully refined yet, I think Mount has all of these attributes in his locker. But now we move on to the young players that I think Ten Hag should be given opportunities to over the next month or so. So I think Dangor has to start playing Eriksen and Casemiro in an aggressive pressing 4-2-4 shape where the wide midfielders push up alongside the front two and the back line drops off about 10 yards too deep. It's just plain retarded. Ten Hag has to stop doing that, it just doesn't make any sense. Ugarte has to come in, but with Mainu out for a month, I think think Dangor has to play. Toby Collier at the very least, but I don't think Ten Hag will because he's just terrible with developing youth players, despite this made up narrative that Ten Hag is somehow terrific with young players, when in reality he'd rather play the likes of Johnny Evans, Casemiro and Eriksen over players like Alvaro Fernandez, Kambwala and Oyedele, who weren't even given fair opportunities before they were sold. Absolutely no excuses to have Casemiro or Eriksen over Gore or Collier. And it's not just because they are youth players, but it's because I think they're actually better in that central midfield role in Ten Hag's side than either Casemiro or Eriksen, because they actually have the legs to play it. I'm not the biggest fan of Toby Collier, but Dan Gore can definitely replace at least some of the creativity Eriksen brings from deep, and if he is given consistent minutes over the next 2 months, I think he could be Eriksen's long-term replacement in the new year. Ethan Wheatley has to at least start on the bench, and if we are chasing a goal, I want to see him feature. I am preparing an analysis video on Wheatley specifically, so let me know any questions you want answered about him in the comments, and also check out my Patreon for the match analysis Telegram group chat, which will be active for the Brentford game, and you can also find my unreleased videos and articles on there as well. Harry Amas has to come in at left back, because now we just don't have a left back at all, with Mazraoui out and Dalot having to shift to right back. However, there are reports that Ten Hag is considering using Johnny Evans at left back, and if that does actually happen, I just rest my case. I think all my points against Ten Hag will be clear for everyone if Johnny Evans does indeed start and Amas doesn't feature. Ethan Williams I'd like to see make the bench, but I doubt he'll get any game time over Garnacho, Rashford or Ahmad, but he has to play over Anthony. Anthony isn't improving, in fact it seems like he's getting worse. He offers practically nothing as a right winger other than a bit of work rate and some spastic jiggles. Williams 100% deserves his chance over the Brazilian. So let me know what you think of these personnel changes and what changes you'd like to see as well.